Hello everybody, thank you for taking the time to view this talk. You can click on the play button on the slides, or if you're watching it on YouTube, hopefully we'll go at a pace that makes sense. My name's Stephanie Jameson and I'm a consultant clinical psychologist in Trafford CAMS, and I'm here with a colleague.
Hi, my name's Alexis. I'm a mental health practitioner at 42nd Street in Manchester.
And we've been collaborating together with the Trafford Strategic Safeguarding Partnership to put this talk together in the hope that it's helpful for all of your work with young people, particularly those who are self-harming.
So we're here to introduce to you the Greater Manchester Safeguarding Procedures, Self-Harm and Young People document. It's designed to support professionals in Greater Manchester to respond to disclosures of self-harm made by young people in an empathic, non-judgmental and effective way. It contains details around self-harm, including some practices, triggers and potential indicators. It explains how to respond to young people in a supportive way and details pathways which must be followed.
So it's important to acknowledge that for some people, self-harm may have been an important way of coping for some time and coping with their emotional pain or distress. And it would therefore be inappropriate to request that they immediately stop self-harming or instruct them to do so. We hope that this guidance gives you some alternative ideas. Particularly when talking with young people, when you're concerned about self-harm, it's important that you're initiating a conversation that feels supportive and empathic and is effective in thinking about safer ways that may be more appropriate. And the decisions around the conversations and the things that might be useful will be really individual. The recent NICE guidance encourages us to think much more about that, and so alongside looking at these procedures, it'll be helpful to hold those in mind.
We've found that holding that non-judgmental safe space for a young person where they can have an honest conversation with you about the emotions that are triggering their self-harm can go a long way for them building trust in your relationship and may even impact differences in self-harming behaviours in their future. It feels very important to recognise that when hearing disclosures of self-harm from young people, it can feel very shocking and trigger you to really worry about them. It might even mean your instinct is to get them emergency medical attention, but we've learned that that's not always the best thing to do and not always appropriate.
And young people often tell us that one of the things they find most tricky talking about self-harm to somebody who they may know well or not well is when they feel like they're left to one side whilst the person runs around organising what they would hope to be the best care, when actually what the young person really is looking for is someone to listen to them, someone to hear their concern, and someone to help them have a sense of hope about things being able to be different. So we'd encourage you to remember that in most cases of self-harm, young people can be managed without going to hospital for treatment or for some other medical intervention, unless the self-harm is such that it needs medical care. In cases of medical emergency, for example, where a young person has really recently taken an overdose of some medication, then it would be important to seek medical attention or medical care, either by calling 111 and seeking guidance, or if in a very acute emergency, attending A&E. So for most young people that you're talking to where they have self-harmed, they may or they may not understand that there's a cycle that that's happening around the self-harm, but the conversation that you begin with them may help you and them to understand this.
Young people have told us that one of the things that makes them stay quiet and not make disclosures is because they're terrified of what the response will be. Feeling that they'll immediately be put in an ambulance and shipped off to A&E can be really frightening and can limit their ability to discuss things with you. Providing that accepting, open space and letting them know that you're there to listen will be a very powerful tool for you. We hope that this guidance can help you to start having those conversations where you build a clear picture of this young person and how you can support them.
You may or may not know that professionals working in Greater Manchester, including Trafford, can access a range of guidance through the Greater Manchester Safeguarding Children's Procedures Manual.
You can find a link to these procedures alongside the video. This guidance is to help your understanding of the policy, not to replace any training that you have. We would also encourage ongoing conversations with colleagues to ensure that any risk assessments made are a group decision. As you can see from this slide, the general guidance is Greater Manchester wide, and each borough, or most boroughs, have separate pathways to follow from there. You can use the links to find out more about the borough that you're working in.
This slide lets you see the contents of the procedures, so you can click easily into the section that you're looking for. As mentioned earlier, there's been some nice guidance republished in relation to self-harm on the 7th of September 2022. As time goes on, this guidance will help change our thinking. These procedures were written before that guidance, so please read these procedures with the guidance in mind. In particular, it encourages us to continue the conversation with the young person rather than relying on a ready-made assessment tool for assessing risk.
The new NICE guidelines also highlights the importance of assessing each young person on an individual basis. That really supports the way that we're working in this guidance by talking about having a very open conversation with a young person and making sure we make space to listen.
Appendix 1 of the document sets out the Trafford pathway in a visual form, highlighting the pathways for steps in a low-risk situation as well as a medium or high-risk situation where a more in-depth conversation will be needed.
You can find further criteria in Appendix 4 that will help you to determine whether you assess a young person as being at low, medium or high risk. As we mentioned before, every case should be assessed on an individual basis and discuss with colleagues any uncertainties about this categorisation. This part of the guidance shows the risk assessment questions. These questions will form the conversation that you're going to have with a young person who's disclosed that they've self-harmed. It's really important to try not to make it interrogatory. So use the questions as a guidance for yourself and ensure that all of these areas are covered with the young person. Number 1 priority is the young person's safety. The second priority is described as being an understanding of what's caused them to self-harm. And the third, offering help to the young person, but never forcing it on them. The next few slides show examples of the questions that you'll be asking of the young person, and they are all important pieces of information that need to be gathered. You'll see on the slides that we've continued to include effective, empathic, non-judgmental. Those are the key basis of the conversation that you'll be having.
The slides take you through the questions. It's important to remember you don't have to ask every single question. They're a guide to encourage the conversation. And the aim is to build trust with the young person so that they can feel empowered to tell you their story and to engage with you on thinking about what will help them manage their risk. So as your conversation develops with the young person and you are running through the different questions, no doubt in your mind you'll be beginning to think about what your responses might be and the document sets out what some of those will be. It's key that at the beginning of the conversation you've thought about and spoken with the young person about confidentiality and the limits of this. Particularly given you're talking about risk, it'd be important the young person knows that there will be limits to your ability to maintain confidentiality. It's also important that you and they agree what will happen following the end of the conversation. Young people tell us how affected they can be by not being clear on who will be told about their information and not being part of their conversation to share that information. So for example, if the young person knows you're likely to tell another teacher or to tell their parents, it'll be really important to ask them how they want that information to best be shared and whether they want to be part of that conversation. The procedure sets out all of these responses that you might need to take and gives guidance on how to do that.
This slide shows some do's and don'ts which you might want to consider when you're having a conversation with a young person who's disclosing self-harm. Do take them into consideration. We're sure they'll be really helpful.
And as your conversation continues, alongside holding in mind your responses, you'll also be holding in mind some other questions that the guidance describes as second level questioning. These are factors of risk that will be important to hold in mind as you're running through the questions. You may know some of the answers to these questions from your knowledge already of the young person. However, it may be important to check in with these aspects as well.
You can find some key contacts for Trafford if needed on this further support slide, and a list of really useful websites for yourself and also to signpost for young people and families.
There's a really helpful talk from the Anna Freud Centre in relation to suicide in young people by Professor Appleby. If you are seeking further information in relation to self-harm and recent trends, this would be a good place to look.